Well, hello there to those of you who are watching. It is a Friday evening and it is a holiday weekend. So I don't know how many, at least it's a holiday weekend here in the United States, so I don't know how many people are actually going to be able to turn out tonight. But we already have a few people in the chat. Hello, the Avatar. Hello, Jeff Allen. Thanks for showing up. And whoops, and then I forgot to mute the Discord, the YouTubes, so I'm now hearing my own stream, which also tells me just how far behind the streaming is. I always forget that this isn't like instantaneous. It's very different from doing live chats on YouTube or on Discord. This is YouTube. It's very different from doing live chats on Discord, because there is something of a delay. Hello, Procellus. Thank you for stopping by. I also realized that I made a slight little mistake when I put out the announcement on Subscribestar and Patreon today, in that I didn't explicitly note the whatchamacallit, that thing that happens when you live on different places of the earth, so that the sun is in different positions in the sky, and so that your clocks aren't the same as other people's clocks, and so you have to note specifically which clock your time zone. I forgot the words for time zone, and also I forgot to note what time zone the time was in. And that comes from when I posted the announcement in the Angry Discord server. I used those Discord timestampy things that automatically adjusts to people's time zones. And then I don't even have to think about it. And then I just copy pasted the text directly into Subscribestar and Patreon. But I did schedule it on YouTube too. And I'm still learning how all of this works, because I don't do a lot on YouTube. But as I've mentioned, I do want to change that in the coming year. I would actually like to reach the point where I'm eventually just running the occasional game on YouTube, in addition to putting out fairly regular content. Jeff Allen is asking, and I don't mind anyone asking anything. This is a very casual hangout, and I have no plan for it. Originally I was going to play, just sit and play some retro games and just yammer about whatever, but we'll see how that goes. But Jeff Allen is asking, what am I drinking? I am a Wisconsinite, and so my drink of choice is a brandy old-fashioned. And so I usually make myself one on Friday or Saturday evenings, just to chill out with video game time. So that's what we've got. Brandy old-fashioned, sweet, with cherries as a garnish. Because I'm a child and I prefer my booze to taste like fruit juice. I'm actually not much of a drinker. I will have an occasional cocktail. Just, either with dinner or socially with friends or just hanging out and relaxing. But that is it. So, yeah. Anyway. So I didn't really come into this with a plan. And by all means, if anybody in the chat wants to ask any questions or throw any topics out for discussion, I am happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll eventually move on and start playing some video games, or I might talk about some stuff that's going on with the site. Jeff Allen is enjoying a bourbon old-fashioned there, too. Bourbon old-fashioned, which I also appreciate, though I prefer the brandy to the bourbon. Anywho, one of the problems that I've discovered lately with doing live chats, live streams, and things, because if you're not, by the way, a supporter of my website, theangrygm.com, the Avatar has a vodka cranberry, which is also good. I actually had a very good cranberry Moscow Mule last weekend. I stopped. I can't remember where I stopped. I stopped for lunch because I was on my way between places, so I stopped in to get a burger, and they had a specialty cocktail that was basically a cranberry Moscow Mule, or a cranberry mule, not a Moscow Mule, and that was very good. But so if you're not a supporter of mine through theangrygm.com, then you may not know that I have a Discord server for my financial supporters, and that every month I host at least one live chat event where I check in and let my community know what's going on and take some Q&A and talk about various tabletop role-playing gaming topics. And I've hit a little bit of a problem with them lately as well, because with one thing and another, I haven't been gaming very much. I haven't been running my regular tabletop role-playing games. So I find that when I'm not doing that, I don't have nearly as much to talk about. I've also been working very behind on my deadlines, as those of you who follow me know. I'm cranking out basically, in this past week, I have cranked out 4 feature articles on my website, which is roughly, 20,000 words of content, and I usually spread that out over a month, but in this case, it's just all backed up into the last week of the month. And so with all of that going on, I find it very difficult to find things to talk about. And it used to be fun, and I guess this is going to be kind of a somber comment to make, but it used to be kind of fun to, talk about like what's going on in tabletop role-playing gaming news, and what's coming out, what new things are going on. And obviously I primarily write about Dungeons and Dragons because that is what most people are playing, even though lately I myself am not playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I still haven't adopted the D&D 2024 rule set yet. Though I did pick up my player's handbook and my DM's guide and have been glancing through them, but I haven't made a dedicated read of them yet. But I find that even following that stuff online it's kind of not what it used to be. Like, it's all just drama lately. And honestly, it's been like that for a lot of years. Like, if I want to talk about the latest in D&D news, basically I could talk about how everybody is fighting because Wizards of the Coast has decided to slag Gary Gygax, and some game developers, and even Elon Musk on Twitter decided to call Wizards of the Coast out on that, because they're basically slandering the guy. Like, anybody who knows anything about gaming history knows that they are utterly and completely slandering the guy who created the games that we all love. And it started with Ben Riggs coming out with I think it was Ben Riggs. He wrote another history of D&D book, and a high up at Wizards of the Coast wrote the foreword for it, and the entire foreword was a bunch of hand-wringing about how it's so hard to talk about old stuff, from the old days of the early, because then you're talking about all these misogynists and racists who did all these terrible things and made games that made everybody sad because they were so exclusive and mean and blah, blah, blah. And so we had to make all these decisions about what to do. And honestly, it's all a load of bullshit. We all know that. Like, anybody who's been in gaming for any length of time knows it's all a bunch of bullshit. So they put this out, and then they got called out on it, because it's a bunch of bullshit. And some prominent figures in the gamosphere on Twitter, or X. I know it's not Twitter anymore. I can't get used to that, and I don't want to call it X, so I generally call it Twix. So a bunch of people on Twix called out Wizards of the Coast for basically slandering Wizards of the Coast, and people who worked, I think, like Rob Kunz, and came out, and one of Gary Gygax's daughters came out and put out statements that this was basically a bunch of slanderous bullshit. I guess it's technically libelous bullshit, right? Because it's printed. So this is all a bunch of libelous bullshit, and it's all terrible. And then it got amplified by Elon Musk, of all people. So Wizards of the Coast, some of the folks at Wizards of the Coast who have Twix accounts, they decided to double down on the whole thing and say, "Oh no, I've offended the Grognards and Elon Musk, boo-hoo, QQ, cry more, whatever." And so that's the fun now of being in the online gaming community, is fighting about this shit. And everybody being on a different side of the culture war. And it's been like that since really 2015 was about the turn, where it just has become sort of miserable to be a part of. And man, I just want to love and make games. And I'm not particularly happy about supporting Wizards of the Coast and writing about their products because of crap like this, and because they make statements, because they've come out basically and said that, I'm part of the problem because of my skin color and my sex. And, say what you will, it's kind of hard to want to give a company money when they keep calling you the enemy by virtue of your inherent biological characteristics. But at the same time, I just don't want to be involved in this shit. Just like I don't really care about what Chris Perkins thinks about who you should vote for or anything else. It's just, I just want to play these pretend elf games. So it's really hard now to just find stuff to talk about. And because of all this drama, I'm not even super excited about getting into D&D 2016. Or D&D 2024. I don't know why I said 2016. So what can you do? I just want to sit. I want to write articles that help people run the best games they can, eventually write my own system, put out some good content, but I've also been very, very behind this year because this has been a very difficult year for Angry Games Incorporated. So, what can you do? But it does make all this live streaming and doing monthly live chats very, very difficult. And again, I know this, like I said, I came into this without a plan, so I'm just yammering away. And again, if anybody in the chat has anything to say, or if anybody else has joined in, have I disconnected from the voice, from the text chat? Yeah. It's also really weird to, YouTube doesn't really show participants very well in the chat. Like sometimes it just doesn't, you click the participants tab and it just doesn't show anything. But then again, I might just not be very good at this. So what can you do? Anywho, but I did want to come and just do a hangout, just kind of a casual thing. First of all, because it has been a rough week and I've been putting a lot of work into the true scenario design thing. So I just wanted to have kind of a casual hangout. But also, because it is Thanksgiving here in the United States, and it is important at this time of the year to take advantage of Thanksgiving as a reminder that we need to look around at the good things we have in our lives and the things that we're actually grateful for. Even when times are dark, and, many of you know that I've had a difficult year, that's when it's most important to take a look around and remember all the things that you are grateful for. And I am really blessed. I have a tremendously engaged and active community. And very, and excellent, both financial and emotional support. Like, I have people who don't just financially support me, but also cheer me on constantly, and who have been kind of a rock in my life. And they've sort of been, I do feel bad because I've been very temperamental, especially in like text chat, and I have had more than my share of arguments that were not really worth having. And so I do feel bad sometimes that I haven't been treating my own community better. And they've been very understanding whenever I've apologized. But nonetheless, it's good to acknowledge how blessed I am, how lucky I am to have these people. The Avatar is saying, when people have legitimate criticism of old school media, I wish they'd approach it more like this. This is a seminal work that laid a great foundation, but we think it can be improved as follows. You know what? I take what you say, and I don't disagree, but I disagree, and I'm going to say why. And I'll say how you could do it even better. Okay? It shouldn't be necessary to put a disclaimer on something old. Okay? If something was published 50 years ago, and you are republishing it, or you are doing a book of the history of your game, it should be understood by everyone that you cannot judge the old material by whatever the current standards are, and also that you yourself, like if you're Wizards of the Coast or whoever, you also can't be judged by what TSR did or what Gary Gygax did or whatever. That should just be understood. You should not have to say this old work was, had problems and we think it can be improved. That's unnecessary. The only reason to say, there's a couple of reasons to say that. Reason number one is because you don't trust your audience and to understand the distinction. And so therefore you are distancing yourself from it. Which that's an okay reason. But there's a less okay version of that. And I'm going to use a term some people consider impolite. And, you're just going to have to accept that I'm not a polite guy. But there is a component of virtue signaling in this, where it is very important for you to let people in your audience know that you yourself are virtuous, that you hold the right opinions, that you recognize the original sin of creators of ages past, and that you are not a part of them. And that is, it's, on an individual level, it's performative. It's almost narcissistic, but on an individual level, when an individual does that, it is performative. Okay? It is signaling to the world that you are virtuous, which you should not have to do. And if you have to explicitly do it, then maybe your virtue could be called into question. If you are a company and you are doing it for marketing reasons. It's almost always, when a company expresses an opinion, it is always disingenuous because a company does not have an opinion. A company is an organization. It is not an individual. It has no opinions. So when a company expresses an opinion, it is disingenuous because it is for marketing purposes or for some other purpose. Okay? But there is also a harm that happens when you put these sorts of disclaimers on things, even if it's just a very wishy-washy little light disclaimer like, we need to be better than the old days, yada, yada, yada. Whatever it is, the laid a great foundation, but we need to improve because we need to be better today. The issue that arises is that when you put disclaimers on those things, and there are people who can separate those things from modernist views, because there is a concept called modernism, which is judging something by standards that exist today that did not exist then. I'm like, this is a minefield trying to explain modernism. Because the instant thing I go to is like slavery. Okay, there was a time on Earth when literally every culture and continent on Earth had slavery. Was it wrong then? Yes, slavery is wrong. It is evil. Nobody should be enslaved. Okay, that's my hot take as my opinion, right? Is slavery is wrong and you should not do it. You know, but also, you go back 2,000 years, literally everyone on Earth was doing it. There is not a culture or continent that was untouched by slavery. Okay? So we can look back and say, well, they should have known better. They should have been better. That just, it wasn't the world, it wasn't the viewpoint, and morality, like, literally was just not that developed. So, you know, I'm not forgiving it. I'm not saying it was good then, it's evil now. But we also can't judge people in the past by our modern understandings of morality and our modern standards. The thing is, though, you can still enjoy any material from an older time and from a different culture or when perspectives were different. You know, even though they have references to things that you yourself today recognize, you know, no longer fit in the modern world. There is nothing wrong with that, especially because art through the history of human culture resonates with deep human truths. Any art that has survived 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever it is, obviously resonates with deep human truths far beyond certain modernist takes that we might have on it. When you put a disclaimer in front of it, be it a movie from the 1970s or a book from the 1890s or whatever it is, you are tacitly shaming people for enjoying it at all. Okay, you are putting a stamp of disapproval on it. When you say, yeah, you know, this is a great work of art and whatever, but, you know, there's kind of bad stuff in here. It was a different time, we'll forgive them, but there's bad stuff in here. You're still going to have the overall effect of chilling people's otherwise legitimate and perfectly valid consumption of that media. You're kind of shaming them. And it's becoming really, really dangerous because we're starting to get disclaimers on things that, first of all, many of these things are not based in truth, which is a big problem. Like, you go to the attacks on Tolkien, you go to the attacks on Gygax, these things are not based in truth. And that's been demonstrated time and again, and it's not really worth getting into that argument. So now we are taking the foundations of our own modern artwork. We are putting these disclaimers on it saying, you can enjoy this, but should you really be enjoying this? Like, it's kind of icky. Which, even if that is based in truth, it is still now destroying the old art, because eventually, you know, there's going to be a certain number of people who are going to read that disclaimer and be like, I really don't want to, maybe I don't want to read this. Especially because the disclaimers are so vague that it doesn't give you an accurate assessment. Like when you put that in like a collection of Lovecraft stuff and you say, you know, this was written by a terrible racist guy. And then you actually read Lovecraft's writing, like, you know, apart from using some vernacular of the time, there's not actually a whole lot of, there's not really explicit expressions of racism in most of his work. But now I'm kind of like afraid. If I've never read it before, I'll open it. There's this disclaimer. Oh, you shouldn't read this because, you know, back in the day, he you know, he's a terrible racist. It's like, oh, okay. And now we are destroying our entire cultural heritage. And that's not good. I mean, we have to be able to look back at both the good and the bad of our own past, especially because if we can't talk about the bad in our own past, we can never learn from it and move past it. If we start pretending, say, I'm going to use slavery as the example again, because we can all agree that it is evil. But if we start erasing slavery from our history and trying to pretend it never happened, which is a thing that we do, then we don't know the dangers that can result when we sort of start dehumanizing people or looking at people as properties and things like that. And even though we're only talking about pop culture here, you have to remember that everything is downstream of culture. And I had a literature professor once, and one of his favorite phrases was, the artist is the weather vane of society. Okay, your current art tells you not where society is, but where society is going. So if we start putting warning labels on our art and making it seem icky, so that people aren't looking at the art, then that affects everything downstream of it. Anyway, that's just my speech on that, and that's not really what I expected to get into tonight, but Rally Cat is saying, hello, Rally Cat, welcome. I know you said you hadn't played recently, but have you noticed a big difference after the new Baldur's Gate? I see the response mirroring how people used to push the impact of Critical Role. To a big difference in new player baggage preconception. I have noticed a little bit of that, but again, as I said, I've kind of unplugged myself from a lot of the gaming community online now. I used to, this past year, I have been very out of touch with the gaming community. In years past, even when I was not active on Twix and when I was not active on Reddit and other forums, I used to lurk, and I have accounts on platforms that are not explicitly the Angry GM and not really tied to me in a way, in any noticeable way, so that I can lurk without really getting involved and just see what things are being said. But I haven't really been doing a lot of that. But I have seen some of it. I have seen some criticism of people now expecting D&D, new play, the complaints, okay. New players now, they play Baldur's Gate, that gets them excited about D&D, and then they come in with the wrong ideas about what D&D is, and so it ruins Dungeons and Dragons. It makes it impossible to run for new people because they have these ridiculous expectations, or they're expecting me to incorporate scenes with wild-shaped druid bears that they can have intimate relations with, or whatever the complaint is. And let's be honest. Since the beginning of time, or at least, I'm not even going to talk about since the beginning of time. I'm a gaming guy, so I'm only going to go back to 1974 and say since the beginning of role-playing games. Since the beginning of role-playing games, everything has been destroying role-playing games. This is not new. Even in my own lifetime, okay? We lived through, so we have Critical Role. Before we had Critical Role, we of course had, now we're going back a few years, but World of Warcraft and all the online role-playing games were ruining D&D because they're sort of a lateral move. People would get very interested in fantasy MMORPGs, and then they would drift into D&D, and then they would expect things to be the same in tabletop role-playing games, right? And then before that, sometimes it was different role-playing games that were ruining role-playing games. You go back into when I was in high school, and things like Vampire the Masquerade was ruining D&D. The Dragonlance books ruined D&D. Magic the Gathering was ruining D&D. All in different ways, but it all amounted to the same thing. It was all, we were pointing at the thing that wasn't D&D, that was either taking interest from D&D or creating interest in D&D, and then we would say, this is ruining D&D. Okay. The fact of the matter is, if somebody shows an interest in D&D and you sit them down at the table, and you explain to them how to play, and they say, oh, I saw on Critical Role it works like this, or I played Baldur's Gate and it works like this, and you say, well, yeah, that's Baldur's Gate, that's Critical Role, but those things aren't really valid, let me explain, and then here's how it works at the table. One of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to say, oh, okay, cool, and start playing that way, or they're going to say, oh, then you know what? Actually, D&D might not be for me. And then you say to them something like, well, I'm sorry to hear you say that, but you've only been here for half a session. If you were open-minded and you gave it a chance, why don't you give it 3 sessions? Just hang out for 3 sessions and then decide. Let me show you what it's really about. And then they're either, okay, or they're, no. And that's pretty much it. That's all you can do. But that's all you could do even if they hadn't watched Critical Role. Even if they had just, randomly discovered D&D in a game store, and you said, hey, I'll teach how to play. Sure, come on over to my place and you can play with my group. Or, if they're online and they saw the hashtag and they're like, oh, whatever. I can tell you the Big Bang Theory story at some point, which is which also involves an editor from Paizo trying to get me banned from Gen Con. Because I had the temerity to enjoy the Big Bang Theory. I shit you not. But I will not name the guy. But, no matter what it is that created that initial interest in D&D, you're still going to have that same basic exchange as soon as they sit down at the table. It's going to be, oh, okay, this is how it works. This isn't what I was expecting. And then you say, well, this is how it works. Keep trying it. And then they either like it or they don't. Or they just like it and there's no complaints at all. So it doesn't really change. Biscuit, please. Hold on. Cat's got my microphone cord. Hi, sweetie. Yeah. So, I don't sweat it that much. Let's see. Gamer Daddy says, oh, that's a good one. I assume the quote about the artist being the weather vane of society. I'm guessing based on the timing here. Jeff Allen, slightly hot take regarding the impact of Critical Role and the baggage players may have. I run better games than Matt Mercer for the players at my table. And that's the experience I worry about. So here's my hot take, which some of you may or may not like, but Matt Mercer's actually an excellent game master. I don't have any qualms with him. I've watched him run his games. And the other thing is, I've watched his commentary and instruction, where even he himself frequently says, the stuff we do on the show, or the stuff we did on the show, I honestly have not been plugged into Critical Role now for a couple of years either. But when he was doing instruction and advice and Q&A and stuff, he was very clear himself that they were not presenting D&D as a genuine experience, and your expectations should not be the same. But then when he got down into giving actual game mastering advice, he was very good, And he had a lot of doubt that Matt Mercer, if he could probably run a better game for my players than I. Game's got to recognize game here. See, and now Jeff Allen is saying he is at his table, implying that at my table, like somehow Matt Mercer's skills don't translate to any person's table, and there's not just objective levels of skill. Maybe you are better than Matt Mercer, or maybe you're holding to this relativistic view or this relative view, but I'm saying this flat out. Matt Mercer's a very good game master. Objectively, he has more game mastering skills than most people do. At pretty much any table, he would probably run an excellent game. Which I think is also part of the problem. If I can now add another hot take to this, okay? game masters, and I include myself in this list, we're all a very insecure bunch with very delicate egos. Okay, it is very hard to be confronted with someone who does an objectively good job as a game master. Because, you know, we are full of our own doubts and our own, you know, our own insecurities. Like, did I do the best thing? Did this game go well? Are my players checking out? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? You know, we all question our own abilities, and we all have our own insecurities, and we all still get nervous before we run our next game. And any game master who claims they don't get nervous before running a game, and claims that they don't have insecurities or doubts, they are either lying or they are psychopaths. They're either lying or oblivious. I won't say psychopath. They're either a liar or they are just completely oblivious. Okay? They are delusional. Okay? So the problem is, Matt Mercer, a lot of people don't like that. You know, a lot of people don't like successful people. And I think a lot of the crap he gets from game masters in the gaming community is what we used to call sour grapes. I think a lot of people just don't like the fact that the guy has made millions off running games and that he is a very, very good game master. He is a very good performance artist. And he has made a whole giant franchise out of it. So I think there's a lot of sour grapes and a lot of jealousy. I don't trust many people to be objective in their views. Jeff Allen is saying there's hyperbole. However, I think people worrying that they can't compete absolutely can run great games at their table, learn from other GMs, but don't feel too intimidated. Yeah, right. Basically, people should just stop being normal human people. So, anyway, that's enough of me defending Matt Mercer, because I really don't want to be in that position also. But I do think a lot of the shit that Matt Mercer gets it's not objective criticism. There's a lot of insecurity and projection going on. Proselyus can confirm he still gives good advice and tells people not to worry about matching him. Yeah, he does. Which he's also extremely humble, which is something that a lot of people need to learn. Not me. Do not learn humility from me. I am the opposite of humility. But getting back to the main subject is, which I don't even know what the main subject was. Getting back to the subject on my hands. Where did we go? How did we get here? Oh, Baldur's Gate, video games, everything destroying role-playing games. Everything's always been destroying role-playing games. Yeah. It's tough to find things to talk about. I guess that's where I'm back to now, is it's tough to find things to talk about with gaming because I haven't been running too many games. My AD&D 2nd edition game has been... It restarted, but it keeps going into pauses between the holidays and my work schedule and people traveling and stuff. So, and it kind of went on hold at sort of the worst moment too, because it went on hold right before the players returned to town after a giant ass adventure that ended the first act of a 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say 4-act campaign. And there was a lot of stuff so the players are going back to town, and they have a lot of treasure to sell. They have a lot of they have a lot of like restocking and repairing equipment to do. The wizard found an old spell book, and he's got to study it and learn what spells he wants to learn, which this is 2nd edition. So literally everything is onerous. It's not as simple as, well, I will just copy these spells into my spell book. Okay, you do it. But Oh, Jeff Allen is... I made Jeff Allen feel defensive now. I'm joking. I know you're not actually defensive. But to stress, I think he's very good. No sour grapes here. Apologies if that didn't come across. No. Okay. See, this is something I get in trouble with a lot. Let's have this one out, too. Since I know even people who aren't listening live are going to go back and watch this later, and I'm going to catch a good number of my community in this. Okay, I use conversations between people that I'm a part of to then veer off and speak generally and impersonally about no one in particular. So, Jeff, I was not reading any sort of, I hate Matt Mercer because he's better than me in anything you said. My only criticism there is this whole... Don't fall into the whole relative thing. Just if you've got game, recognize game kind of a thing. There's skills that translate from table to table. But that was just a minor thing. I know that you're not personally slagging on Matt Mercer, but I am now speaking generally about all the peoples. Everybody in the community, or at least everybody in the community who sits there pissing and moaning about Matt Mercer and Critical Role and Baldur's Gate and everything else that ruins gaming. Did you know, by the way, once upon a time, this is probably going to shock some of you, but way back in the day, do you know what was ruining D&D? Ravenloft. The original Ravenloft module. In 81, I want to say 81, 82, I don't need to look it up. It was 80-something, right? The original Ravenloft module is published. It was going to ruin D&D. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, it has become a sort of a problem when I'm interacting with people and when I'm writing on my blog, on my site, because I don't like to call myself a blogger, even though I am a blogger. Which, now that it's 2024, is basically the equivalent of being proud because I'm still a telegraph operator. But anyway, it is a problem I run into frequently, where somebody will say something, or several people will say things along various lines, and I will eventually write about it, or respond to a conversation as a whole. And then I will say, I've noticed this, lots of people do this, that, what have you. And then I say, let me address this shit, because this goes on far too often. And then one of the people who maybe said it, even though I don't even see people's names. No offense to any of you here, George Arnold or whoever you are, but I am not going to remember tomorrow that it was Jeff Allen or George Alex or whatever in the chat who brought up Baldur's Gate, even though it was Rallycat who brought up Baldur's Gate or whatever. But tomorrow, I may be in my Discord server, or I may be writing the next article. This is writing my next article, by the way, because this is how I type. I may be writing the article tomorrow, and I'm going to reference this conversation, maybe, and I will be calling out everybody, and it'll be like, people in the community all talk about this. And then, but what happens there, and again, like I said, it's not, tomorrow I'm not going to remember that it was Jeff Allen or Rallycat or any one thing. Nothing personal to you. You're wonderful people, and you're hanging out with me on a Friday night. But nonetheless, the names don't always stick in my head, but because I keep conversations that I have in my head, then they all sort of mush together until there's a pattern that emerges. I've had 6 conversations about Baldur's Gate in a week. Then all of a sudden it becomes a thing I write about. So then I'll write about it, and I'll say, yeah, all you losers, you know, you all think Baldur's Gate is ruining gaming. Well, let me tell you why you're morons. I mean, Baldur's Gate is, you know, Ravenloft ruined gaming once upon a time, so you all should shut up. And then I'll have someone, and I'm going to use Jeff Allen here as my example, even though he's not going to do this or anything else, and has already made the point clear that there is no hatred for Matt Mercer, but nonetheless, then all of a sudden I will get a comment on my website or an email or a private message from Jeff Allen saying, you know, if you want to call me out for saying bad things, you should just say it to my face. You know, you complain because people don't give opinions, and then you humiliate them. It's like, I didn't call you out. I just, you know, it was just a jumping point. You were one of 17 conversations I had on the topic. I'm now commenting on it. And this actually happened just before I came on. I got a private message from someone who personalized a general statement that I had made where I had asked quizzes in my last couple of articles where, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I got a lot of answers that were very wishy-washy and lacking in conviction, which I kind of call that out because I want people to have some strength of their conviction. Jeff Allen, I am hurt and distressed by this outcome. Well, come on, the name's ain't the Angry GM, okay? Not the nice, friendly, sunshine and rainbows and bunny farts GM here. So you knew what you were getting into. That's the other thing. It's like, every time this happens, it's someone who's been following me for ages. It's like, well, it was funny until it was me. Sorry. But yeah, so I got a comment because I said, you know, all you people who give all these conditional answers where it's like, well, it depends. If you use this word to mean this, then that, and if you use that word to mean this, then this, and yada, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so like, it's like, I'm not giving you an answer. I'm giving you a logic puzzle. Right? Where you decide what the word means and then pick out which answer is valid, and I will show you that my deductive abilities are proper. And then I will but my point was really I wanted to challenge people on what the word itself means to begin with. It's the whole point of asking the question is, what do you think the word means? And you need to think about this for you. You need to beat up the definition in your head. Okay, so then I got called out. It's like, you know, you complain, you tell people that words mean things and that they can't just give you dependent answers, and then you tell us that you can change definitions to be whatever you want them to be. And it's okay. Calm yourself down here. It's all just a joke, and I never used your words. I never used your name. I never personally called you out. I didn't use a direct reply. I just said, people in the universe do this thing. Are you going to come and sit on me? You want to come be a part of the stream? All right. Just leave my microphone alone, though, okay? You're not going to leave. If you're not going to leave the microphone alone, yeah. Okay. That's not going to work, sweets. I love you. No. Sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, I get that one a lot. It's like, you know, how dare you call me out? It's like, I didn't call you out. You called you out. You had anonymity, and you chose to get rid of it. You know, you were just a face in the crowd, all of whom were wrong. Besides, nobody's right but me. That's one of the rules for being in my community. All right, let me catch up on the chat here. It's just Rally Cat. Oh, that's funny to think about. Gamer Daddy. Hello, Gamer Daddy. Oh, did I say hello to Gamer Daddy before? Yes, I did. Okay. Have you Oh, okay. No, I inserted, you missed a word there, and then I automatically inserted it, and then I tripped over it. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that would have gone unnoticed if I hadn't done a double take. Because I miss words all the time. I don't call anyone out for typos. Have you been able to look through the new 5th edition DMG? I personally like the section they put in telling the GMs they're allowed to disallow rules abuses, peasant railguns, and bags of rats and stuff. Yeah. I have actually started... So, I did pick it up, and I have started glancing through it. And I'm going to say that in general, first thing, the new editions of these books are absolutely gorgeous. The art, I hate the art. The art style, I hate. So when I say gorgeous, I mean things like the layout. Everything is very clean. It is easy to find things. The text stands out against the page. All of that stuff. But also the order in which they're presenting the information is actually very good. I like that the new DMG starts with how to run a game instead of here's the D&D universe. Like, let's talk multiplanar cosmology. Because the 2014 DMG was idiotic because it launches into multiplanar cosmology and world building. Okay. But yes, that the specific call-outs, where it points out that you have to use your brain, and, make judgment calls and disallow things that are problematic because because you have a friggin' brain. Yes, that's very good advice. I am very glad to see it included. It only took me saying it for 9 years for them to figure out it should go back in the books. And actually, it's been a problem even longer than that. Like, this was actually a 4th edition issue. Like, people think things like 5th edition is the first edition that invented pedantic rules lawyery players using the precision wording of the rules to invent stupidity like the peasant railgun. Okay, there was actually a very specific incident that came up in 4th edition. Yeah, Proselyus. Sorry, I just saw Proselyus's comment go, to you, it was the most frustrating Discord conversation in your life. To me, it was a Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so in D&D 4th edition, the primary class feature of warlocks was that each warlock had a magical ability that triggered when they killed a character. Or not when they killed a character, when they killed a creature. Okay, so the Fey Pact Warlock, their special ability was that if they landed the killing blow on an enemy, they could then instantly teleport like 3 squares or 5 squares or something. Whereas if the Infernal Pact Warlock landed the killing blow, they got temporary hit points or something, and I don't remember what the Lovecraft Pact Warlocks got. Anyway, doesn't matter. So on the message boards and forums of the times, because a lot of this was still when forums were the main way that everybody communicated about gaming. On the forums of the time, especially the official D&D forums, there were conversations about, so here's what you do. You get a bag of rats with 1 hit point each, a whole bag of them. And then, whenever you, the warlock, you want to teleport, you take out a rat and you kill it. And that'll trigger your Fey step. And so the term became the sack of rats Warlock, which was an abuse of the rules, but, you know, they kept trying in errata, because 4th edition was also the edition where they went errata crazy, where they kept coming out with errata every second week. Like, we were going to just keep updating our rule books, because nobody paid attention to it. But they kept trying to change the rules to eliminate this problem. Like, oh, it has to be a hostile creature, it has to be a hostile threat, yada, yada, yada. You know, they keep trying to change the precise wording. Like, you keep rewording a Magic the Gathering card to avoid all the abuses. And they were fighting against this concept of the Sack of Rats Warlock. Which, really, so, 2 things. First of all, honestly, it just takes a GM saying, no, that's stupid. And then the player says, well, you know, technically by the rules, and then the Game Master takes the rule book, clocks them across the face, and says, no, that's stupid. And then the argument is over. But, you know, Game Masters aren't always willing to do that. And I can't even, I make fun of it, but you really can't fault people who are fairly new to gaming and jump into the game mastering chair for following the rules. Like, because that's how games work, right? Games are books of rules, and you follow the rules, and then you play the game. The game master's job is to run the game according to the rules. So if the rules technically lead to this outcome, where technically by the rules, a warlock can carry around a sack of rats and use them to trigger teleportation, then a relatively inexperienced game master who's just trying to run the game right, you can't fault them for being like, oh, I guess, yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. Even my famous rant about the just say he's on fire, the Jeff Allen is talking about the bag of rats being helpful. To what was it? The Necrocarnate. In 3.5. Yeah, but I mean, like this rules lawyers who say technically, and then they give you an interpretation of the rules that leads to a ridiculous conclusion, have existed since the beginning of time as defined as 1974. Or 71. Why am I suddenly thinking 1974 is not the right date? It was 74. I'm not crazy. Yeah, and the errata approach is a way that... The Avatar is pointing out that the errata thing is one way Magic the Gathering made D&D worse. So is, to be honest, exceptions-based rules. Okay. And exceptions-based rules is a specific term that the designers use. Now, I'm going to refill my glass here, but it's just with the Diet 7-Up. I'm not putting any more booze in there. I just need more to drink because my throat dries out. So don't judge me. So exceptions-based rules was the term that they used when they were developing 4th edition to describe an explicit approach to the game where you have a set of general core rules that are fairly vague and cover only the most general situations. And then over them, spells, character abilities, magic items, etc., they all have specific rules that override the general rules. Which, I mean, you read the rule books to any card game like Magic the Gathering or Pokégo or Yu-Gi-Mon or whatever. In this day and age, actually, this is written in a lot of board game rule books too, where it says, in any case where the text on a specific card conflicts with the rules in the rule book, the specific card takes precedence. That is called exceptions-based rule design. Okay, where you design your general rules, and then you can design all sorts of specific cards, specific ability, yada, yada, yada. D&D was not designed like that in the past, okay? In 3.5, the watchword was, there is one watchword. This is not a watchword. This is a design philosophy. Watchword was the wrong phrase. The design philosophy for D&D version 3, which is the correct appellation, by the way, D&D, if you look at the covers, D&D, the third edition was labeled D&D version 3. And then D&D version 3.5 2 years after. But either way, D&D version 3, point X, the design philosophy was, there is one set of rules, it applies to everything in the universe equally forever. Everything follows the same rules. And everything has to play within those rules. Okay, so a spell didn't create exceptions to the rules. It lived within the rules to the point where spells were even classified by how their effects worked. So, like, if you go back to your D&D 3.5 rulebook, and you go to your magic chapter before your spells, one of the very interesting things you will find is that under each spell school, which I'm looking at here, there are a collection of sub-schools which define specific rules that are in effect for all spells of that type. So, for example, an illusion spell, a spell of the illusion school, could be further classified as a figment, a glamour, a pattern, a phantasm, or a shadow. And each of those rules describes very specifically how the spell works. So, figments create false sensations. Glamours change the sensory qualities of a subject. Pattern, I have to read this shit because I don't remember it. But patterns create visual sensory impressions, but also are mind affecting. So so it's not just a visual pattern, it also changes the subject mind in some specific way. So like a hypnotic pattern, everyone can see it, it's in the air, but it is also in the mind of everyone who sees it. Whereas a figment is just a pattern of lights in the air. And then phantasms are mental images that exist in the subject's mind, which means a subject who's not affected can't see the thing that the spell creates. So there were all these general rules that talked about this is how these specific spells work, and all the spells that are in that set of rules have to follow these rules. Whereas 4th edition did away with all of that and said, look, we don't need to make general rules that describe the physics of the universe. Instead, we just need a bunch of game rules to talk about how to play the game, and then we can create spells and magic items and character abilities that that don't have to conform to those rules. They'll still try to conform to those rules, but most of the rules actually define the framework for how powers would be written. You know, and the few keywords and descriptors that existed. Okay. 5th edition lost its mind. Okay, because it is written on both approaches. Right. The Avatar is saying, I feel like that makes sense for Magic the Gathering. Tens of thousands of cards are impossible to account for, but not for D&D. Honestly, neither approach is really the best for D&D, to be honest. The 3.5. Now, D&D version 3.5 is absolutely my favorite edition of the game. If I was stranded on a desert island and I could only have one role-playing game to play for the rest of my life forever, it would be Dungeons & Dragons version 3.5. Just the core rules by themselves, because that's all I need categorically the single best role-playing game ever published by humanity. Now, that said, it is a terrible approach to writing a role-playing game, because it really was literally an attempt to write an overcomplicated, overwrought physics engine. There are way too many rules in that book that are just completely unnecessary. Okay, the monster building rules, for example, were an absolute nightmare because they were designed around the idea that you absolutely had to stat up everything that was possible to know about a creature. Like, just like a player character has skills and feats, you know, and all of their basic attributes and this and that and the other thing, you know, every creature in the game, even if it was just a fire beetle, had to be just as completely defined as a player character, which frankly is ridiculous. I'm never going to have a situation where I need to know whether a fire beetle has ranks in survival. So, anyway, it's a ridiculous way to build role-playing games. So is building it as a collectible card game where you have this generic set of rules and then basically frameworks for how to build cards, because all the powers and spells and everything else were just cards. And then building out all of those so that you couldn't possibly know the rules. This was really the weakness of 4th edition, was you could not know the rules because every rule was written on an individual card. So you had to wait for a player to play the card, and then they would say, well, you know, this, I make an attack roll on a hit, then this, and then this, and then this. You would know, like, the game effects. You would know what it means when it says, hit, you know, 1d6 plus 3 bludgeoning damage and push 3. You would know that stuff. But as for knowing just how generally stuff worked, like, 4th edition didn't even care about that. It was written like Magic cards. There was flavor text on the card, and then it was just how the power worked mechanically, and how shit worked in the world just did not matter at all. Which is, again, how I got into the big ol' just say he's on fire argument. Which, if anybody is around who hasn't heard that story, let me know, and I will tell the story of the just say he's on fire. And I think the court records are no longer sealed, so I'm allowed to talk about it now. But anyway, because I forget which stories I've told and which stories I haven't. Anywho, really the best way to, being fair, it succeeded completely in doing an overcomplicated, overwrought physics engine. Yes, Jeff Allen, being fair to D&D 3.5 or D&D version 3, it did do what it set out to do very well, and despite the fact that it was a giant, overwrought, kludgy, complicated mess, it is still the best expression of D&D that was ever written. Okay. Kevin Lintz and Wyvern Master 23 are both asking for the fire story. Okay. Now, this was during the 4th edition era. This is fun. So this was during the 4th edition era, and I became very active in various forms of official play in 4th edition. So I was running a lot of games at conventions. I was running games at game stores. At the time, I was actually working with Baldman Games. I actually even produced training materials for them at the time to train game masters to run official games at conventions, because Baldman Games was the company that was running official convention play for Wizards of the Coast, and I don't know if they still are, but and obviously I am a game master. I don't like to play in games, but nonetheless, at a game store, I had finished up running a game of my own, and another game master was running a game for... Now, he was a fairly new game master, and he was running a game for Actually, I don't know if he was in... you know what? I don't remember the situation. Okay? Doesn't matter. The point is, I ended up sitting in as a player at another Game Master's table. Which was already that was not going to go well. Because I am egotistical, judgmental, and impolite. Now, I try to curb myself when I am sitting at another Game Master's table. And I am very... I'm very polite. I'm very respectful. If I'm in someone else's car, I let them drive. And if they don't ask me for directions, I don't say anything. And if, it's like, that's how it be. So I don't generally speak up at someone else's table. The worst case scenario is I say, hey, thanks for the game. And when they say, you're going to come back next week, I'll be like, yeah, good. But thanks. Anyway. So we're playing in this adventure. It was an official adventure. So it was not one the Game Master had written. And we are in a cave. And there are fire elemental creatures in the cave. Okay. And there's a group of fairly new players at the table, too. So there are fire elemental creatures in the cave. And they emerge from these lava pools. And I know we're in trouble because the Game Master says strange creatures emerge from the lava pools. And that was the whole description. Strange creatures emerge from the lava pools. I cannot remember what he was using for miniatures. We were in person. We were in a game store. But the miniatures were not indicative of the creature. And so the only description we got was strange creatures. And I think I was the one who spoke up, and I said, hey, I have Arcana. I think it was called Arcana in 4th edition. Do I recognize these creatures? And the Game Master looks at me and says, they are like nothing you have ever seen before. Now, I don't want to push too hard, but I do ask, can you tell me anything about what they look like? Can you give me something to go on here? He's like, they're strange. They are fire creatures. Was the whole description. All right, fine. So we're just fighting masses of fire. I did find out later they were Imoliths, which is absolutely one of my favorite 4th edition demons ever. Okay, but they were Imoliths, which, in case anybody cares, an Imolith is, because in 4th edition demons were elementals that had been corrupted by the abyss, so demons had elemental properties in addition to being evil. They were corrupt, evil, destructive, and elemental. So an Imolith is a column of fire with just basically a vertical column, a tornado of fire, and on the front of it, it has basically a demon-shaped obsidian face. Like there's a demon mask just in front of the fire. And then it's got 4 demon hands that just come out of the fire, also made of obsidian. So it is a column of fire with obsidian hands, 4 of them, and an obsidian demon face. All right, now you know more about this creature than I did or any of my companions did at this table. Okay. So soon thereafter, one of the players, and again, I need to stress there's a group of fairly new players who are being introduced to D&D at a game store, and me sitting at the table with them, which is also why I'm trying to sit back and take a back seat. And one of the players ends his turn adjacent to one of the Imoliths, and so is afflicted with a condition whereby at the end of each turn, he takes ongoing 5 fire damage. This was a mechanic in 4th edition. Ongoing X damage meant that at the end of each of your turns, It's at the beginning of each of your turns. At the end of the turn, you save. At the beginning of the turn, you take ongoing damage. So at the beginning of each turn, you take X damage of whatever type, and then it would say, like, save ends, which means the condition is ended if you make a successful saving throw at the end of your turn. So every turn you would take the damage, you would take your turn, and then you would make a save to end the conditions that were on you. If you were successful, the conditions would end. Okay, so one of the other players, a cleric who doesn't have much to do with his turn, says, can I help my companion who is on fire? You know, and the game master says, well, he's taking ongoing 5 fire damage. There's nothing you can do. And the player says, well, can I, like, take my cloak off and throw it over him and, like, beat it out? You know, because he's on fire. And the game master says again, he's taking ongoing 5 fire damage. It takes a save to end that. Actually, I think it was the player himself who was trying to desperately put himself out, now that I think about it. So the player himself, on his turn, is now desperately seeking a way to put himself out. Can I take my, can I beat it off? Can I drop on the ground? Can I roll around? I think there was like a pool, there was a hot spring, there was a pool of water on the battle mat. And it's like, can I roll in the pool and put myself out? And he kept saying, can I put myself out? I'm on fire. I need to put myself out. And the game master just kept repeating the phrase, you are taking ongoing 5 fire damage. It takes a save to end. Now, in this game master's defense, by a technical reading of the rules, and this was a criticism of 4th edition, by a technical reading of the rules, there was nothing a character could do to attempt to end any condition on themselves if it required a save. Okay, so if you're on fire, there's nothing you can do in the rules that will let you do that. If someone else comes over, they can use a skill check. I think it was a heal check. You could use a heal check on an ally to end a condition on them. So, like, if someone was poisoned, you could use a heal check to end the poison condition. If someone was taking ongoing damage, you could use a heal check to end the damage, what have you. But the point was, an ally could help you, but you could not help yourself. And that is because the heal check specifically noted that it worked on allies, and there was a rule in 4th edition that said, you are not your own ally. That if it was something that you could use on yourself, it would specify you or your ally makes a saving throw. But if it just says ally, it doesn't work on you. Now, realize this is now 15 years ago, and I might be getting some of the rule details wrong, but the essence here is correct, that by a technical reading of the rules, if you are under a condition that a save can end, there is no mechanical action you can take to end that condition until you are allowed your saving throw at the end of your turn, and if you fail it, you're just stuck with the condition. Okay? Which, anyway, this exchange keeps going back and forth. The player continues to get more desperate and say, well, can I throw myself in the water? That should put out the fire. Can I do this? Can I roll around? Just keeps coming up with solutions to being on fire. And the game master keeps responding with the same phrase, you are taking ongoing 5 fire damage. There is nothing you can do. You are taking... And finally... And this is mainly because what I saw here, and I have to defend what I'm about to do. What I saw here was a group of
new players who really want to enjoy Dungeons & Dragons and want to come into the hobby, who are slipping away from the hobby because this completely idiotic game master, insisting on the letter of the rules, is denying them the one thing that is central to the role-playing game experience, which is this whole open-ended, you can do whatever you can imagine thing. So if you picture it in your head, you can imagine it. And, if you're on fire, if you can come up with a solution, dadgummit, it should work. Or at least you should get a die roll. Like, you should at least give the kid an extra save. Like, if you want to roll around in the mud and try to put yourself out, fine, make a save, and then you get your save at the end of the turn if that save doesn't work. Something like that. I don't even care. But I lost it. And I stood up and I screamed at the game master, he's on fire! Just say it! Say, he's on fire! I was asked to leave. I was not welcome back in that game store after that. I felt very bad. I wrote a personal email to the owner of the store who I had known and said this was the experience that happened. And, and the owner was very understanding, but nonetheless appreciated it if I didn't show up for future, play events, which I understood. I do not blame them at all. But I just lost it in that moment. And that also completely encapsulates exactly what the way 4th edition spelled out its wording so precisely as to leave no wiggle room. That's exactly what 4th edition did to people's brains. I was like, he's on fire. Stop. Before you look in the rule book, use your brain. If a person is on fire and they drop to the ground and roll around, that could put it out, right? At least give them a check. Doesn't matter what the rules say at that point. Your brain needs to come first. Anyway, so that is the just say he's on fire story. I do blame 4th edition and the way 4th edition was designed for that, because that new game masters who entered the hobby at 4th edition had very mechanical, rules lawyery, very abstract mindsets. They would view everything in terms of the strict wording of the rules. And a lot of the arguments and debates that happened online had to do with the strict wording of the rules and, and logical deduction, interpretation, and rules lawyery nonsense. You know all the stuff I'm talking about. A lot of which still remains today. Now, that stuff also has happened since the beginning of time. But 4th edition made it worse because there was nothing else in the game other than the abstract rules. Like, again, I'm going to go back to 3rd edition as my contrasting example. 3rd edition had a lot of highly mechanical rules. But it also told you exactly how things work in the universe. One of my favorite things in 4th edition, or in 3rd edition, is how magic items work, and another one is how spell memorization works. So 3rd edition explains that when you memorize a spell, as a wizard, when you memorize a spell, it works like this. Spells are so ridiculously complicated and intricate to cast, okay, that you have to cast the spell in advance in kind of a quiet, relaxed environment. So when you memorize Magic Missile so that you can later cast it, what you are really doing is doing most of the extremely intricate casting of the Magic Missile spell at camp and then leaving off like the last words or gestures or movements. You're basically casting almost all the spell and then holding it in you so that you can unlock it with the spell components, the verbal, somatic, and material components. That's how spellcasting worked. Okay, whereas if you were a divine caster, what you were doing was you were actually praying for your spells, and then they would be locked inside of you, and then you could unlock them with the proper at the proper moment with the prayer, whatever. If you were, if you had spontaneous casting, like if you were a cleric and you could spontaneously cast healing spells, it was because you had practiced those spells so much and you were so, and they came so naturally to you that you could convert a spell that was stored inside of you. You could take that magical energy and on the fly reshape it into healing and shit like that. All this explanation is in the D&D version 3.5 Player's Handbook. It actually tells you what in the world the wizard is doing when they're preparing and casting their spells, and so on and so forth. And that is one of the things I like about it, and 4th edition lacked all of that. 5th edition lacks a lot of that. What does it mean to prepare spells? It means you've prepared spells. Like, preparing spells means preparing spells. That's all preparing spells means. It has no reality in the world. Time for another cherry. All right, what's going on in the chat here? Because there's been people saying stuff. October Foundry. What is the right approach to tabletop role-playing game system design? I think version 3 is closer, where you want basically you need a core action resolution system, right? That's number one. This is what you need to do. Okay, you need to make it possible for a game master to resolve literally any action with a simple mechanic. And the D20 mechanic actually does that, right? It's like roll a D20, add an ability score modifier. If you have training in a specific skill, add your training, and then compare it to a DC. With that alone, you can resolve any imaginable action. It's as simple as that. Okay? Then build on top of that specific rules as necessary that are special cases to those things, but that don't change the rules or override the rules. Okay? 5th edition actually gets kind of close, to be fair. There's a little too much crap on the character sheet. There's a little too many power cards. There's a little too much of 4th edition's influence in there. But it's certainly not as... So what D&D... The mistake that version 3 made was that it's then like, okay, we have this core mechanic. That's a good start. Now let's use it to define literally everything. Let us have pages and pages. Like, if you look in the Player's Handbook in 3rd edition, okay, what you will find takes up the most space is... So obviously spells take up a lot of space. And then the combat engine takes up a lot of space. But in the combat engine is actually a lot of defining specific areas and specific actions and specific this and specific that. And, complex resolutions to every possible action like disarming and tripping, yada, yada, yada. Which have these multi-step processes where, again, if you have a simple action resolution system, you really don't need complex rules for things like grappling and tripping and what have you. You can just use the action resolution system that is there along with a simple rule like if you're locked in melee with an armed opponent, if the opponent has a sword and you decide to go in for a tackle, or you try to take the sword away from him, or you try to knock him over, you're probably going to get bonked with a sword. In other words, you have your opportunity attack system. But beyond that, most of what's in the Player's Handbook is the rules for calculating DCs based on very specific situations. So, like, if you go, let's go to the climb skill. Climb is a good one, or balance, whichever one I find first. Okay. I found climb. Okay. So, what you have in climb is it basically takes up an entire page of text. And it is all based around figuring out the DC. Okay, so first describes a climb check. You can climb up a wall, yada, 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 at certain speeds, yada, yada, yada. A slope is considered to be an incline less than 60 degrees. A wall is any incline greater than 60 degrees. Climb check that fails by 4 or less means you make no progress. One that fails by 5 or more, you fall, yada, yada. Climber's kit plus 2 circumstance bonus. Then we go to a table, and it defines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8... Eight different surfaces, gives a DC for each, and then there is another separate table that applies a modifier because these are changes to the surface. Then some more stuff. You can climb more quickly by taking a penalty. You can catch yourself by making a check with this DC. You can catch someone else who's falling by making a check with this DC. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, and most of that page space is just taken up by making sure someone can compute the precise, proper DC for a climb check, which is a ridiculous level of rigor that is just unnecessary. DCs are not that important. They don't have to be that precise. And in fact, there should just be a very simple way of calculating DC. Like, there should be a general rule for calculating all DCs. Just as there's a general rule for resolving all actions, the GM should have a general rule, and I don't mean easy, medium, hard is 5, 10, 15, or whatever it is. That's not a rule. That doesn't help you, because I don't know what it means. For what does it mean? How do I know if an Arcana check to brew a potion is easy? Like, what is because it seems like brewing any potion should be hard. I don't know. Anyway. So, 5th edition probably has the right of it. I do wish it had more mechanics and less actions, but I think that's probably about the right wheelhouse. Basically, a game master should be able to run the game without having to crack the rulebook. And if the game master ends up in a situation where they don't know what to do, they should be able to deduce it based on their understanding of the rules without having to look it up in the rules. Every time the game master has to look up in the rules, it means the rules are too complicated. Okay. We have Gamer Daddy. I feel like that was... Yeah, I did reference that. Jeff Allen. I feel like 4th edition wanted to... It had the martial, divine, arcane, etc. power sources and then just stopped. Okay, I feel like you're responding to something I said there. Like, I made a comment like, the role-playing game should do this. And then you're saying, it seems like you're saying, it feels like 4th edition wanted to do exactly that. But then it stopped. But since I'm responding to this 15 minutes after I finish the story, I have no idea what that's in response to, so I can't respond back. Hello, Kevin Lintz, who is, I believe, making fun of me for not understanding why the game store might not have wanted me to come back because I screamed at another game master. But, yeah. Okay. Jeff Allen. I had this conversation with someone once that 4th edition didn't allow people to roleplay because there were no rules for it. That is an interesting one, and I never know what to make of that. Especially because the word roleplay. Alright, I gotta say, Mr. Kevin Lintz here, the real-time banter thing doesn't actually work because of the delay. I see you're bantering back with me because of the thing I just said. And Jeff Allen too. If you're going to comment on something I'm saying, leave a little context in there so I can remember what it was you were responding to. Anyway, it didn't let people roleplay because there were no rules for it. I would actually say 4th edition was an impediment to roleplay because it had too many rules. The whole you cannot use a heal check to lift a condition on someone, on yourself, only on an ally, is a thing where the rules are so defined that you can no longer think of healing as just, I know first aid. And so anything a person could reasonably do with first aid, I can do. When you weigh the first aid rules down under so many rules where it's like they can only be used under this specific condition with this kind of check to do this, and this, and nothing else, then you're getting in the way of people thinking about their skills, thinking about their tools, thinking about everything they've got as things that exist in the fiction of the world, and then being able to use them in that way. Okay? You can't use first aid to do anything that the rules don't explicitly say first aid can do. Now, you are just you're just using game constructs. At this point, this is not the first aid skill. This is a button that has very specific uses. And if it's not in the right context, the button doesn't work. The key to role-playing, and this is where this discussion gets confusing, so I'm going to come back to this, but for right now I'm going to say, the key to role-playing is that the players and the game master must all first imagine the reality of the fictional world so that it works the way it would if it was real. If you were really a person who knew anything about first aid and you inadvertently caught fire, and even if you didn't know anything about first aid, you could respond to that in any number of ways. You could throw yourself into a horse trough. You could roll on the ground. A friend of yours could come over with their cloak and beat out the fire. These are all things that can be done if you imagine that in the fictional world, there is a person whose clothing and hair has caught fire because, we say characters catch fire, but usually what catches fire, it's your clothing, your hair, your equipment, whatever. Eventually you start, but you do eventually start to burn, but I was having this conversation in my Discord too about candleification, which is where people will eventually become candles, because human fat burns like candle tallow, which is a delightful image to think about. But anyway, that aside, that's just a fun fact for the night. If you can't imagine these things as elements of a real fictional world, then you can't do anything with them except what the rules say. Then your character ceases to be a person with skills and abilities and equipment surrounded by, trees and grass and rocks, and it becomes just power cards to play, dice to roll, points to tally, shit like that. And then that is what actually breaks the role play. Because if you can't even imagine the world as realistic, even in a combat, if in combat the world becomes this abstract chess game, which is so abstract that you can't picture it as any sort of reality, then you can't come back into the game when you get back to town. Like, eventually you are so removed from the idea that you are interacting with a fictional world that even in situations where you could interact with it as a fictional world, you no longer do. You're just not thinking of it in those terms. Okay, we're playing a board game. This is not a fantastic story of adventure about characters. This is a tactical board game. Okay. The other problem here, and this is where I will say that those people who say that 4th edition did not allow for role-playing because there were no rules for it, I will say they are right, and this is a point. And that is a point in their favor. Because a lot of people use the word role-play to mean inter-character interaction. They use it to mean the talkie-talkie between players and between the different characters, or between characters and NPCs, or whatever. Okay, and we have to accept that. I used to fight against it. I used to be like, that's not what roleplay means. You're talking about interaction. That fight is lost. It's not worth arguing anymore. It's the same at this point if you try to tell people you shouldn't use literally when you mean figuratively, because literally means the opposite of figuratively. Sorry, language has evolved. Literally means figuratively sometimes and literally other times, and you have to use context to determine which, and that is how people communicate, and fighting against it at this point is pointless. So likewise, when we're talking about role-playing, we have to acknowledge that people use role-playing to mean inter-character interaction. Social interaction, let's say. The talkie-talkie bits. In that respect, 4th edition had absolutely the worst, most limited social interaction rules of any edition of D&D, and that's a pretty low bar because all of the editions of D&D have really crappy social interaction rules. They really do. Now, for a simple, if you're just sitting around shooting the bull, what's the word for it when you're just talking about the weather and rumors? Small talk. People are just making small talk or just talking about their plans or whatever, or even when the players are just working out their plans or they're talking to their NPC friend about what they're going to do, whatever. None of that stuff needs rules. That's just, you're just playing out a conversation or you're describing a conversation. But as soon as there is a conflict in the interaction, you are trying to extract information from someone who for some reason does not want to provide it. You are trying to work out a price for an exchange. You are trying to convince someone that something is true that they are not inclined to believe. You are, whether it's true or not, trying to convince someone to believe something. You are trying to influence someone's actions and they are resistant to that. In those situations where there's now a conflict, you need rules to resolve the conflict. At that point, the character's social skills and abilities come into play, and it needs to be rolled out once the player has stated a plan. Once the player has said, I am going to lie to this person about why I need this medicine in the hopes that they will give me a better price. I will tell them it is for my sick child in the hopes that they'll give me a better price. Then, okay, let's roll it out. Okay, they believe you and they knock 10% off the price, or they just give you the medicine outright, and then you're going to use it to you're just going to huff it to get high or something. That is such a terrible example for me to go to. It's like, I'm lying to the apothecary to get medicine. I'm saying it's for my kid when really I just want to get high, and other heroic things adventurers do. I don't know why that. Whatever it is, though, as soon as there is some sort of conflict in the social interaction, you absolutely need a way to resolve the conflict mechanically. And the character's skills and abilities, along with the player's plans and decisions, must feed into that just the same way when the player says, my plan for getting through this door is I shall pick up this bronze statue. No, that seems heavy. I shall pick up this this display pedestal in this museum, and I shall use it to smash the door open. Okay, that is a good plan. That can work. That's the player's plan. Now I shall ask you to make a strength check to determine if your character's physical abilities are up to the plan that you have described. You know, if I will use your character's physical abilities to determine the actual outcome of the plan. Same way, I shall tell a lie to the herbalist about my need for this medicine to trick them into dropping the price. That is the player's plan. And now we shall use your character's cunning and guile in order to determine the actual outcome in the game world. Right? Which, when I say it that way, makes perfect logical sense, and yet we always have 10,000 arguments about, well, why should we have to make die rolls if I could just talk blah blah, I can just, or why should I have to decide what my character says before I can make a check, especially if I want to play a character more charismatic than myself. And it's for the same reason that before you can roll to break down a door, you have to tell me how your character could possibly do that. If we're not doing it that way, then you, the player, are not bringing anything to the table because you don't have to come up with the plan. Now I don't need you. I can just roll checks for your player. First I'll roll an intelligence check to see if they're smart enough to figure out how to use a battering ram. Okay, that's the plan. Now I'll roll the strength check, and then I can just type it up and tell you what your character did. So you, the player, have to come up with the plans, or else you're useless. The character has to execute the plans, or else their statistics and skills and abilities and equipment and level and everything else become meaningless. So 4th edition did not have roleplay in the interaction sense because its social interaction rules were utterly the worst of any edition, including 5th edition, whose social interaction rules were already pretty shitty. Okay. Actually, no edition of D&D. Like, we can even go back to the older editions of D&D, where it had, there were certain things that older editions of D&D had that the newer editions don't have that they should, that have to, one of the big things being a reaction roll, which was just a random roll to determine based on the character's, based on a first impression. Based mainly on the character's appearance and carriage. If you didn't know how any given creature in the world might react to the players already, there was a roll to determine their initial disposition toward the characters. Okay? Then you could play from there. 3rd edition had rules for influencing disposition. Okay, this was the main thing, was if you wanted an NPC to do something for you, the key was you would first try to influence their disposition and get them as friendly towards you as possible in a normal persuasion setup. Okay. If you were just trying to persuade someone to do something for you, if you just wanted a favor from someone, you would try to influence their disposition to the point where they were friendly enough that they were willing to do the thing. Whereas if you were trying to, if you were using deception or intimidation, that was more direct, right? If you're using deception to convince someone to do something, at that point, that's not persuasion. You're just telling them whatever it is they need to hear that would make them do the thing, right? So that you just, here's the thing. I might, persuasion-wise, if we're strangers, and you need $20, okay, you might talk to me and build a rapport with me to the point where I felt friendly enough to you, where you might then say, hey, I'm really stuck, I'm stranded, I need $20 to put gas in my car. Do you think you could help me out? And if I am feeling friendly and well disposed enough towards you and I'm of the proper alignment, I might then give you the $20. That's the persuasion route. Alternatively, you could come up to me and say, my wife is in the car. She's bleeding to death. I need to drive her to the hospital because she was shot and I'm out of gas. I need $20. And then at that point, it doesn't, like, at that point, my disposition to you matters less, because if I'm a reasonably good person, if I actually believe that story is true, I am going to give you whatever help you need. And of course, there's a side skill in, do you tell the proper lie? Then there's the intimidation route, where you pull a knife on me and you say, give me $20 or I'm going to cut you. You know? So, like, the problem is that also that D&D has adopted this, like, three-prong approach to social interaction. There's either persuasion, or there's lying and intimidation. Basically, you can either be a nice person, or you can con someone or bully someone. Those are your only three options. Which actually leaves things out. Okay, because, anyway, that's a whole other thing. How would you build a better social interaction system? I could talk about it, but then you wouldn't have to buy Slapdash someday. Okay. The Avatar. You are poisoned and you are on fire, just can't be reduced to you take X points of ongoing fire or poison damage. Just, exactly. I mean, this is what we refer to in gaming as abstraction, right? Where you take a complex, real world, or real fictional situation, like someone catching fire, or someone having ingested poison, or someone having been injected with venom, then you have to turn it to game mechanics to make the game work, obviously. The farther from the fictional situation, and the more different, and the bigger the umbrella you make, the more abstract the mechanic becomes. So, for example, ingesting poison, being injected with venom, and all of these other things, this is a very, very complicated thing. There are many, many different kinds of poison. There are many, many different kinds of venom, and they all have very different effects on the body. The more if you boil all of that down to one simple rule that says, now you have the poisoned condition, while under the poisoned condition you have disadvantage on all checks, or whatever it is, and save ends, you have now highly abstracted poison. Okay? You have taken a lot of different complex, nuanced, real-world imaginary situations, and you have boiled them all down to a single mechanic that encompasses them all, and it doesn't matter how it works. And yeah, Gamer Daddy is saying neurotoxin is not the same as hemotoxin, etc. Yeah, I actually managed to respond to something as it came in that time, because I was looking in the right direction. I keep forgetting to look at my camera, so I'm not looking at people. I'm looking all over the place. I'm very animated as I talk. Anyway. So yeah, this is abstraction, and 4th edition, its biggest crime, and I do love 4th edition. 4th edition was a blast to play. It was a blast to run, and it was absolutely fantastic for introducing new people to role-playing gaming. In point of fact, I think it was the most approachable edition of Dungeons & Dragons that exists. I would rather teach new players 4th edition than 5th edition. So anyway, but yeah, 4th edition was very heavily into abstraction. And so as a game master, you need to be aware of that, and you need to unabstract shit. You need to stop before you go to the rules and say, let me think about what's happening here. When someone takes a blast of dragon fire to the face, and they are suffering the ongoing 5 fire damage condition, what that really means is they have caught fire. And so I need to think about it in those terms. I will give credit to 5th edition for moving back from that, where like if you read stat blocks in the monster manual, and even if you read spells, there's usually at least a line of text or just the name of the ability that references what is actually happening. Like if you, like Thunder Wave, I think. I don't have my 5th edition books easily yet. Oh, wait. I have the 2024 one here. I lost custody of my physical 5th edition books in the divorce. In the separation, not divorce. Let's look at what Thunderwave looks like right now to see if this still suits my point. Okay, yeah. So the first line of description in Thunderwave is you unleash a wave of thunderous energy. Okay? It tells you what is happening in the fiction of the world. I am unleashing a thundering boom, a tremendous explosion of noise and shockwave. And then it says, each creature in a 15-foot cube originating from you, blah, 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 successful save, yada, yada, yada. Okay, but the spells at least go to the trouble of telling you first what is happening in the world. Tree Stride is right here. You gain the ability to enter a tree and move from inside it to inside another tree of the same kind. Before it goes into any other mechanics, it tells you this is a spell that allows you to teleport from inside one tree to inside another tree. You can use trees as doorways. Okay? Tongues. This spell grants the creature you touch the ability to understand any spoken or signed language that it hears or sees. Right? It's not starting with the mechanics. This is what the spell actually does in the world. So here I am complimenting 5th edition again. Okay. G. Wright. Hello, G. Wright. I don't think I have greeted you yet. I don't think you had anything to say earlier, which is evidenced by you greeting me. So hello, Angry. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I actually did. I had a very bittersweet Thanksgiving. I'm not going to lie. Many of you know that roughly a year ago now, my long-term relationship ended. And that I am living about 800 miles away from all of my friends and family who are back in New York, and I am here in Wisconsin. So it was a rather lonely Thanksgiving, but nonetheless, Wednesday night, I went out to a local diner, and I know it wasn't the Thanksgiving, but I went to a local diner, and I had myself a Thanksgiving dinner, and very friendly. Everybody was super nice here, and I had a nice chat with the waitress and an elderly woman who was sitting at another table. We chatted for a bit, and I enjoyed that. And then I went down to, I've been attending church services, and they had a Wednesday night Thanksgiving service, and that was very nice. And I ran into my pastor and my counselor down there, and we chatted for a bit. And then yesterday, actually the actual day of Thanksgiving, I mostly focused on finishing up an article so that I could release it this morning, and that's the article that went into early access this morning. And so that was how my Thanksgiving went. I mostly celebrated it Wednesday night. And I called some friends and family back at home, and we had some chats on the phone. So it was nice, but it's a little bittersweet, and I can't pretend that I'm not feeling a little depressed about the holidays right now, just because it's a little bit lonely, but I'm doing okay. And I hope you also had a very good Thanksgiving, safe, happy, and healthy, and all of that. Rallycat. Trogdor taught me that being on fire is normal for peasants. Since you bring it up, have you played the Trogdor board game? I know it's been out for a while now, but I have to say that if it's a fairly lightweight, fairly easy game to play, but it is nonetheless very compelling and extremely fun. I especially like the mechanic where, as you set fire to peasants, they then run around the board, determining, like, they take random moves, running around the board screaming and setting fire to other things on the board. It's a really fun little game. It's definitely worth picking up, and it's very cheap. So, okay. The Avatar. Movies here have misled people about being on fire. When it happens, you don't just run around waving your arms and screaming. I don't want to be the guy who says, well, actually. But I'm actually going to be the guy who says, well, actually. Actually, the big problem is most people do, when their clothing and hair and sometimes selves catch fire, do start flailing around and screaming wildly because essentially they panic and they are in pain and in shock, which is why from a very early age they teach you in school, remember, if you catch fire, stop, drop, and roll. You have to keep teaching people that so when they catch fire, they don't panic and run around and flail and scream. They actually do drop to the ground and roll around. G. Wright is saying, what would a better social interaction system look like? It would look like the one that I'm currently working on. Kevin Lintz is asking about when can we buy Slapdash someday. And October Foundry is also asking about Slapdash. Okay. For those who do not know, Slapdash is a system that I started working on about a year ago. It is a tabletop role-playing game system. A little more than a year ago now. It did end up on hold because of various events in the past year of my life. In the last year, I've been hospitalized a couple of times. I had a long-term relationship that broke down. There were some financial troubles. It has been a very, very difficult year here in the Angry Games headquarters. And a lot of stuff ended up on hold. One of them was this project called Slapdash. Originally, Slapdash was conceived as a response to the OGL debacle of 18 months. It's almost 2 years ago now. Okay. I wish I hadn't said that. So, going back to the OGL debacle that happened in January, February, March of last year, of 2023. Originally, my solution was going to be, I am going to just take the serial numbers off D&D. Just take the core action resolution mechanic, pare it down into a very simple, lightweight, crappy role-playing game system. And then rather than writing about D&D, I would write about that. Wink. And then I could come out with rules hacks and stuff and keep doing the stuff I'd been doing for D&D, but I would be doing it for that crappy, not D&D. Schmungens and Smragens. Hence the name Slapdash. But almost immediately, when I actually started working on the project, I said, well, there's nothing that says I have to stick with the D20 mechanic if I'm going to do this anyway. And so I ended up developing a different core action resolution mechanic. And then I said, well, if I'm going to do that anyway, I could probably improve it this way and that way. And the project got a little away from me. And ultimately, instead of slapping together a crappy replacement for D&D, I ended up slapping together the engine for a system. I then took it through a series of three alpha test iterations with different groups of people, testing out various elements of the system and the system in various states of repair. Determined that I had something worth publishing, started building more rules on top, and then said, Well, shit, actually what I've built here is a lightweight fantasy adventure role-playing game engine that I would much rather run than Dungeons & Dragons anyway. The goal then was to then take it up to the beta test level, publish a test adventure, pre-generated characters, a basic rule set, distribute that to a bunch of people, like the inner circle and the high tier financial supporters in my community. They would play it for a bit, kind of shake out the nuts and bolts, and then I would massage it into something that I could at least put out electronically, like just, PDF rules. And I was envisioning something, at least to start with, it would have about the size and weight of Savage Worlds. That kind of length of rule book. Single rule book, and that's all it would need to start with. And then I would keep building on more rules modules to it and adding features for a year or two, and then I could come out with advanced Slapdash. That became the plan. That is actually still the plan. The only thing is, as I said, between hospitalizations and various life disasters and things and a bit of depression, the entire project ended up on hold for about... Yeah, I have done a little work on it here and there, and I'm still working on it actively. I've started working on it actively again, but ultimately I lost about 9 months to it. So, when you can buy it, I don't know. Okay, it's going to depend on how things go, but the next move is to write the equivalent of a starter box for it. Like the same crap you would get if you bought like the starter box for like the beginner's box, a single adventure module, pre-generated characters, and a simple rule set, which will be distributed to my high tier financial supporters at the Angry GM of theangrygm.com, so that they can test it and see how it shakes out, while I meanwhile then iterate on the design and polish it up to something publishable as the Slapdash basic rules, and they add things like character generation and leveling up and shit like that. And then once all of that's done, I can sell that as Slapdash Basic, and then start releasing rules modules for it, and then eventually, this is all electronic publication now. I don't have designs on making any of this a full rule book, but then in a year or two, when I'm at that point where I have enough to fully make a publishable heavy rule book, then, publish Slapdash Advanced or Slapdash for Reals. And that gets published as a physical book, and then that probably becomes what I'm doing and what I'm supporting for the next several years. So that is the plan. But like I said, unfortunately, the best laid plans of me have gone angly. Let's see. Jeff Allen said good night. Thanks for the hangout. Yeah, I will be doing more of these. This is kind of fun. This is similar to what I do for my exclusive supporter live chats. But this has been a lot of fun. I want to do more of this kind of thing. And I'm actually looking at the time, and I've been at this for about 2 hours now, so it's probably about time for me to wrap up anyway. But it has been a lot of fun. And it's kind of fun to just kind of shoot the shit about role-playing games, and it does kind of restore some of my passion. I've been going through a bit of a crisis where my passion for gaming has been in a lull. And that's mainly because of everything that's been going on, and I haven't been running games as much as I have, and my work has become more about catching up and chasing deadlines. But I need to get past that as I move into the coming year, and I've already started building plans for what... It's reached the point now with 1 month left in the year that the goal at this point is just to start the year in a good place, so that I am on target, I am on task, that I know what I want to accomplish in the next year, what I want to accomplish in the first quarter, and so on, and just have a solid plan in place. I started 2023 with that, and it worked really well. Kevin Malone, hey Angry, I just got here. As I'm saying goodbye, Kevin Malone just got here. How close in scope is Slapdash compared to the original idea for a TTRPG rule set? The scope is still about the same. Okay, I want it to be a game where anything Dungeons and Dragons can do as a fantasy adventure role-playing game engine, so can Slapdash, but better. But like I said, with a rule set that is approximately the size of a single 150-page hardcover book, maybe 100 pages, 100 to 150 pages. That's not that big. So, like I said, the size of Savage Worlds. Okay, and ultimately, the scope creep isn't too much because I've remained focused on I know what it needs to handle. Like, you need to be able to generate characters, you need to be able to create monsters, you need to be able to create adventures. Adventures need to be able to take place in dungeons and enclosed site-based environments. You need to be able to go back to town and do shit in town. You need to be able to travel through the wilderness. You need to be able to have wilderness adventures. You need to be able to have social interaction. You need to be able to resolve traps. You need to be able to resolve obstacles. Like, I have a list of things it has to handle, and it's not a huge list, and it is not... I don't think anything on there would surprise anyone, at least to start with. There's a few things D&D can't do that are definitely on the initial list, but part of it, too, at some point, I'm going to take the big-ass list, and I'm going to have to say, okay, this is the initial release for Slapdash Basic, this is to be added in modules later on, and then to be incorporated into Slapdash for Reals. Because this is a project that's going to have to take some time. I cannot simply stop doing everything else I'm doing just to build a role-playing game engine right now. Otherwise, I will just go out of business. So it's something that has to be spread out a bit. But scope-wise, like, I have joked about scope creep, but most of it has just been, yes, Wyvernmaster 23 is saying, do you know what it offers for players? I do. Now, that said, I can't reveal too much about Slapdash. Partly because I'm playing it close to the vest, and partly because it's still basically being converted from alpha to beta at this point, and I don't know what features will be where. But also because one of the rewards that my high-tier supporters get is the secret inside knowledge about Slapdash's development. So I can't just give that out in an uncontrolled stream, because that's something that, that has been offered as bonus content to people who are basically throwing extra money in there to support the development of Slapdash in addition to my weekly articles. So I'm sorry to have to play that game and do it that way, but it's an integrity thing. I don't mind telling you that it's coming because I want to build hype for it, but I have to keep a lot of it close to the vest at this point. Eventually, the information will be available to everyone. But, meanwhile, though, I am going to call it a night. I do want to stop once. I do want to end just by reiterating again what I started with, and that is, it has been a very, very difficult year. And so it is very important when things are difficult, just as it is important at all times, but especially when it's difficult, to take stock of the good things that, yes, tension dice are a part of... Oh, Kevin Lintz is saying tension dice. Tension dice will be a part, or the tension rules will be a part of Slapdash. I have decided that. But also, yes, Tension Dice is also a separate project that is moving toward a release in 2025. Okay, a final set of tension rules. In fact, 2 different versions of the rules are coming. You're going to have tension rules, and you're going to have the tension pool rules and the time pool rules, complete rules, which will be available for free. They'll just be available on my site. And then Tension Dice as a physical product will also be available. But anyway, I'm going to cut off and stop looking at the chat now, otherwise people are just going to keep me talking. Okay. I just want to say thank you to absolutely everyone who has stuck this through the entire year, and how incredibly lucky I am to have the community I do. Both the people who read my site. This is not just financial supporters. Obviously, I'm grateful. I am grateful for financial support, absolutely. But I am also just grateful for everyone who takes the time to read my stuff, especially to comment on it and share it on social media, which is something that I kind of want to start pushing people to do a little bit more in the coming year, to help me kind of regain some of my position in the role-playing game space, because I have contracted a little bit compared to where I used to be. But I am grateful for everyone who reads my stuff, everybody who comes and hangs out in these live streams and watches me play video games, or listen to me talk about combat, or yammer on for 2 hours about whatever random topic comes up. I'm grateful to all of the people who have emailed me or messaged me with messages of support throughout this last year. That's kept me going. I am obviously extremely grateful for my supporter community and everybody in the Discord server who put up with me, and I have an awesome supporter community, one of the most fun communities to hang out with, and one of the most lighthearted, non-confrontational, non-angry, non-culture and politics and social crap communities you can get online, and I'm grateful for that, because it's kind of a refuge from all of that crap. But I'm absolutely grateful to everyone, and thanks everyone who hung out tonight. Jeff Allen, the Avatar, Procelis, Rally Cat, Gamer Daddy. Who else did I see? Gamer Daddy I mentioned, Rally Cat again. Kevin Lintz came in, October Foundry was here, Wyvern Master, and Kevin Malone showed up at the end. And anybody else who's just been listening quietly and not interacting. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks for everybody who's watching or listening to this recording while you do whatever it is you're doing. I appreciate absolutely each and every one of you. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and let's all hope for a really good new year in 2025.